I know some people are asking how we can afford to do all this for Canadians. That's fair.
So was it a speech from the throne to set out policy, or was it simply just laying the foundation for a campaign speech? Recently, Justin Trudeau and his Governor General, Julie Payette, set the foundation for Canadians as to what the government's plans are in the future. But Brian Lilley, our political columnist, has a perspective that, it really seems to be more of a campaign pitch than it was a throne speech.
Yeah, and right now, Adrian, Justin Trudeau has two big battles on his hands. One is with the leaders of the opposition parties, and the other, we can talk about in a minute, is he's going to have a fight with premiers across the country based on all the things he promised. So the first fight, the opposition leaders, I thought that Jagmeet Singh was going to come out and say, yeah, I'll support this. He's talking about national pharmacare. He's talking about national daycare. That's great. But Singh actually said, you're missing some elements, and if you want my support, then you've got to look after paid sick days for employees, workers across the country, and a change in how the CERB is being modified. So without those, well, we could be looking at an election off of the throne speech. Unlikely, but maybe this just delays it a little bit further down the road, and we end up with the government and the opposition parties unable to come to terms, say, early in the new year, maybe by spring.
We've often been saying, Brian, that it seems like Justin Trudeau is almost bored with the job. He does his daily morning show from the cottage, talks to Canadians. It would seem that this throne speech was just a rehash of so many other promises that this government has made over the last nearly 5 years, not to, at the least of which we can't find those 2 billion trees that they promised on planting. So it's very hard to take them seriously when they are talking about these broad national programs, which not the least of which none of them have a price tag to them. But to your point about the premiers already rejecting some of these big things, like, for example, the Premier of Manitoba, Brian Pallister, saying fund healthcare to the level in which it's adequate so we can take care of our citizens because it's a provincial responsibility. It seems that the federal Liberals seem only want to really dive into what is not within their jurisdiction, and hatching these big, broad national programs, very pricey. But also, they're very the Liberals seem to be so unreliable.
Well, they are unreliable partners, and Pallister talked about that last week when he said, when the foundation of your home is falling apart, you don't renovate the second floor sitting room, and that's what he described national pharmacare as. When the federal government, the promise when it started was feds give 50% and the provinces give 50%. Well, now the feds only give 21%. And instead of saying, we'll up the funding the way the premiers have asked, they're saying, we'll give you another program. Don't worry, we'll look after the money. You guys deliver it, and then we'll walk away. To put this in a very localized perspective for people that maybe aren't that big into provincial federal jurisdiction, think about it this way. How many of us live in towns, cities, municipalities where they don't do basic things right, like fix the potholes in the road, but the politicians are always up for putting up something new and shiny? That's Justin Trudeau here. He's not looking after the things he should, but he wants to develop new programs, new shiny baubles to get people excited. He's going to have a big fight on his hand with the premiers. Premier Pallister, Premier Legault has said absolutely no way. We'll see where Doug Ford goes on this. He's talked a little bit of a good game, but we'll see if he stays on board with that or just, caves and takes federal funding like so many Ontario premiers before.
Okay, we've already seen and heard from the leader of the Conservative Party and the leader of the Bloc Québécois. They will not be supporting this throne speech. The NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, has been going back and forth. You give me a couple of concessions, then I will consider supporting that. But your take on whether or not Justin Trudeau actually wants to defeat himself and defeat his own government and actually go into an election?
Well, maybe not right now because of the rising COVID-19 case numbers, but I still think that he wants an election because he wants a majority. He doesn't actually like the job. He likes the job of talking to people. He likes the job of announcing things. He doesn't like governing. And even the former ethics commissioner has noted that he likes the ceremonial parts of the job. Governing in a minority situation requires going back and forth with the opposition parties, and he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't even like talking to the premiers. I mean, I can't tell you how many times provincial governments have told me during COVID that they found out that they were partners in some new program when the Prime Minister walked down the steps of Rideau Cottage and started speaking into the microphone. So I think he still wants to go, and maybe they don't fall on the throne speech, but perhaps on a budget down the road, or perhaps on something else by, say, March or April.
Well, we certainly know that Justin Trudeau doesn't like the mounting scandals that are trailing behind his government. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.